interviewing Dr. Susan Cheyne. Dr. Susan Cheyne is the co-director of Borneo Nature Foundation, and she is also an associate professor at Oxford Brookes University in climate conservation. Excitingly, she is also the vice chair of the IUCN Climate Specialist Group section on small apes and a member of the IUCN Cat Specialist Group, and does a lot of work with gibbons and with small cat species in Borneo and other things. So we're very excited to have her here on the channel. So interestingly enough, I know Cat Hill, so it's really cool because I saw Oxford, yeah, I saw Oxford Brookes University, and I was just like, oh, whoa, I know someone there. So can you talk a little bit about where you work and kind of your day-to-day responsibilities? I know you're involved in both gibbon and small cat research right now, right?
Yes. I guess it depends on where I am in the world. If I'm in Oxford, then my responsibilities are mostly teaching. But I have to do a lot of research. Again, it's with the IUCN work, it's helping coordinate gibbon conservation, helping work with gibbon conservationists in the field, sharing information that they might need, working on ways of raising money for them. With Borneo Nature Foundation, I get to do field work less than I would like to, but I spend a lot of my time in front of the computer typing up the data to get information out there. So like publications and social media outputs. So my days are really quite varied, which makes it quite exciting.
That's awesome. And I think it's really important for young scientists to know, especially in conservation biology, is that sometimes the higher up you get in your career, the less time you actually get to spend in the field.
That's very true, yes. I mean, even when I'm in Indonesia, I can spend a lot of time having meetings, especially now we've got our NGOs getting bigger. You know, we're talking more to the government, and that's really important to get engaged with them. It's really important to talk to them about what we're doing. We do a lot of work with schools, so we have a lot of meetings with head teachers and things to try and make sure that they're happy with the kind of programs that we're going to run in the schools, and they're really interested in it. And that really makes a big difference. So yeah, it is less time in the field, but I guess it makes that, it almost means that that time you do get in the field is even more special. That's amazing. Yeah, because it's so important to kind of bring in these other holistic sides of conservation as well. So one thing I found when I was looking on your website that I found really interesting was that you're doing a survey of Sunda clouded leopard, which seems to be quite novel. Have you found any really interesting outcomes from that research? Yeah, so we've been doing our camera trap work since 2008, and we've done it in 8 different sites across different parts of Indonesian Borneo. And it's interesting, but it's confusing that we're actually finding out that the majority of the animals that we get on the camera traps are actually males. So we're not really sure where the females are. They may be spending more time up in the trees, you know, they're slightly smaller body size, and we don't often get pictures of cubs. So it's almost, it's created more questions than it's answered. So we've got really good information about population density, but we've created all of these questions about what's happening with the females and where are the cubs, and we're still trying to work that out. Wow, yeah, that sounds like a lot of work yet to come. Very cool. So I think the first time I heard about you was through 500 Career Scientists. So as a person in the LGBT community, what do you think about the importance of representation? I'm a member of the community myself, and when I was growing up, I didn't really meet a lot of people who were like me, who were also interested in the sciences. So can you talk a little bit about that? Definitely. I think it's incredibly important for representation. I think it's, I actually just published an article in the International Journal of Primatology recently about the importance of supporting LGBTQ plus people when they're in the field. Whose responsibility is it to look after things like health and safety, make sure that people aren't being discriminated against, because these systems are in place with many of our universities and our institutions at home, but they're not often in place in the field. And I think it's incredibly important that we have that this is a subject that we talk about, that we make people aware of, whether you're LGBTQ plus or an ally. You need to be aware of these things, that this is something, you know, many of the countries we work in, especially with primates, do not have the best track record for gay rights, unfortunately. So it's something that we need to take very seriously. So I think for me, you know, especially in my work at the university, in my work in the field, I have to be a little bit careful, I suppose, within Indonesia. You know, I don't necessarily go and meet government officials and immediately tell them my sexuality, but I don't equally hide it.
Mhm.
I'm very open and vocal about it at the university. You know, we have rainbow lanyards that we can wear to show that we're somebody that's open, that's out, that can be, you know, that students or even other members of staff can come and talk to us about it.
Right.
Um, you know, we've got posters on our doors saying LGBTQ plus ally. Um, so I think it's incredibly important that people understand the diversity of roles within conservation.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you very much. Because that's something I've always thought about in the field is like, how do you remain true to your identity while also, navigating a very different culture, for example? It's a
Mhm.
challenge. So can we talk a little bit about the Borneo Nature Foundation's volunteer program? Because I know you're also involved in that.
Sure.
And also, what are your thoughts on volunteering as kind of a traditional way for many conservationists to break into conservation? Because I know that can sometimes be a bit controversial.
Absolutely. Of course, because it costs money, it can be a challenging one because you have to have the money in the first place in order to be able to join.
Right.
Um, so our volunteer program was born, or we initially started back in 2001, 2002. We
Mhm.
were only running with volunteers, and we simply couldn't have got the project off the ground without them,
Right.
because we were only functioning in the summer. We went full time in 2003.
Mhm.
Um, it is, I can understand why it can be perceived as prohibitively expensive.
Right.
At the same time, we're very transparent about where the money goes. For
Mhm.
example, it goes to feeding people. For
Right.
it pays for your
Yeah.
food while you're with the project. It pays for your accommodation. It pays for staff to be able to support you and help you and teach you whilst you're out there.
Mhm.
So we actually make a very small profit on our volunteer program,
Mhm.
in terms of unrestricted income, because the vast majority goes to accommodation, staff, uh, our little field trips that we run for the volunteers, and obviously feeding people.
Mhm.
Um, so we're fairly transparent about that, and I think we've looked into increasing the amount of money that we charge, and I know there's places that charge 3 times as much as we do for 3 times less the amount of time in the field.
Mhm.
So yes, it is a complicated one, but at the end of the day, most of the costs go on actually sort of food and accommodation, which
Right.
you would need to pay for anyway, no matter where you are. And we're hoping that the experience is something that is incredibly beneficial. It gives you a taster of all the different types of things that we do, so you can work out what you like, but equally maybe things you don't like, and
Mhm.
that can help you with your future career in terms of where it is you want to go.
Right. So to kind of help you kind of figure out what aspect of conservation interests you most.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think volunteering is a tricky one. So I think as long as people are upfront about volunteering, I think that's fine. I think it when it starts to get complicated and things like, when you go on the Texas A&M job board and they're asking for people with PhDs to volunteer, I think that's a little bit could be more problematic.
Agree. I think there's a lack of investment in jobs within conservation. I mean, the majority of our volunteers are undergraduate students or maybe people who have had an interest in conservation in the past, but maybe have taken a different career path and now they've got time, or they're taking a break from their career. So it's very much aimed at people sort of, like I said, doing their undergraduate degree.
Right.
Um, everything else happily now with BNF, every other position within our organization is a paid position.
It's awesome. It's very cool. And also, I think it's important for us to also be promoting opportunities close to home as well. So for people to also kind of start small and kind of build their way up to international postings, I think is really, really beneficial.
I would completely agree with that. Yes.
So let's see. What are some of the benefits and challenges of being involved in academia in the sciences? Because I know that can be, it's a big question, but
I would say some of the benefits. I love teaching. I love doing research, but I genuinely enjoy teaching, and I really like the fact to be able to engage with students. I teach master students in our MSc in primate conservation, as well as undergraduates in biological anthropology. And I love being able to engage with them, it's particularly when we have things like debates within the lectures, challenging people to actually think about themselves rather than just sitting down and writing notes about what I'm saying. I guess some of the challenges are getting that full-time position. I still don't have a full-time position. I have a permanent part-time position at Oxford Brookes. It's challenging to be able to break into that place where you've got like full-time tenure. It takes tenacity. It takes, I would argue, almost a little bit of volunteering as well for the university. And you do have to make sure that you're producing your publications, because the university very much considers that an important measure of what your academic contribution is.
Right.
But equally, I would say NGOs should be publishing, everyone should be publishing, because it's important to get our work out there.
I was about to say, I think it's important to kind of open up, other people besides people in academia to be publishing, because I think what happens is that we get into this trap of being like, oh, we're so busy, like, how are we going to find time to, write up this work? But that's the way that the work gets out there. And also, I think with people like you and other people involved in SciComm, that's also another way. So we, hitting all these different kinds of channels. So writing in ways that lay people can access, but also writing in ways that are important for the scientific community as well.
Absolutely. The science communication and things like using social media, writing press releases about particular different journals. And some journals are actually getting really quite good. They will, they've got their own social media channels. They will write press releases with your help about particular papers that you're publishing, because they're recognizing the need to get this information out there. So I think the journals themselves are slowly starting to come up to the idea that they need to be involved in science communication to the general public as well as to the academic community.
And that's kind of been a recent change, do you think, or has it kind of been a slow process?
I think it's a recent change. I think some journals are better at it than others. I think some of the open access journals are jumping on the bandwagon a lot better and a lot more quickly. Some of the other journals, it's down to the editor-in-chief whether or not they've got a social media presence. So like International Journal of Primatology, I know, has recently joined Twitter, Folia Primatologica, Journal of Ecology. These have all joined up as well. So I think it's and they promote media releases and podcasts and things about their paper, and they encourage you when you submit your when you submit your publication, and if once it's accepted, they encourage you to write a blog post about it. And I think that's really fantastic.
Very cool. Yeah, that's really exciting that those changes are starting to happen. So kind of my last question, and it's a bit of a general one, but I think it's really important, is do you have any advice to young conservationists or career changers who are looking into getting a job specifically in academia or in field conservation? Any kind of wisdom you want to impart about kind of like the path that you've taken?
Wow, yes.
Good question.
I would say if you put 10 conservationists in a room and ask them about their career path, you will get 10 completely different answers. There's no one way of doing it. I work with people now whose first degree was in criminology, and they're now conservation biologists. It's and I know, and I did zoology. I did a fairly traditional path. I did zoology, and then my undergraduate project, and then some field work, and then went straight into a PhD. I don't have a master's, but some people do a master's. I would say that a master's project or master's program probably is something you want to consider doing. It broadens your experience. It opens you up to a whole bunch of different ideas and opportunities that you might not previously have considered. Getting some experience in the field is important, but that doesn't necessarily mean going abroad. That can be working in a zoo. It can be working in a rescue centre. It could be working with a research centre in your own country, like the Duke Lemur Centre. It's important to have that practical experience, as well as the academic side of things. And then be tenacious. When you're applying for jobs, you may not tick all the boxes, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply for it. You get that experience, that academic practical and practical experience, and then go for it.
Yeah, I think that's really important because especially as people who women or women identifying people, I think tend to they're less likely to want to apply to a job that they don't check every single aspect than men. I've read that.
Yeah,
So I think it's important to also not to self-select. If you hit most of those boxes, I mean, try, go for it. If at the very least you might make a contact, and that might help you in the future or broaden your perspective. So, um,
absolutely.
yeah, I think that's really important. And I also think, like you said, not being discouraged because it is a really difficult field to break into. But
Mhm.
what I always say is that if you really want to do conservation, whatever your personal skills are, you can find a way to apply it. It just might take time to find the job path that's right for you because of how broad the field is. And I think that's kind of like the biggest challenge when you say I'm a conservationist. Like it could mean so many different things.
Oh, completely. I mean, it can be anything from, actually doing physical field research to science communication, community development, conservation outreach, education,
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
fundraising, working on policy, all these kinds of things. And I've missed out a whole bunch there.
Mhm.
You can be a wildlife vet, animal keeper, animal caretaker, all of these different things and more um, are necessary roles with conservation ecology and conservation biology.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to do this channel is because it kind of shows people the different paths that people can take in conservation. That's not just kind of limited to one path. So,
No,
but
it's not. And even if you start out down one path, you may discover that you end up having to kind of learn new skills and bring new things in. I've spent the last sort of 5, 6 years learning about conservation education and conservation education theory and how to analyze the data. So yeah, I think you're also be prepared to be constantly learning.
yes.
I think that's important as well because new technologies are coming out, new ways of doing data, new theories about the best way to impart knowledge to different people and also to learn from the local people we work with.
Right. That's
So I
very,
think it's important always to be open-minded.
very cool. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview. This is fantastic. And
No, welcome.
so
Thank you.